Welcome back to week 11 of Misha and Dianne Watch Santa Barbara.
Hello.
We have finished episode 51. Augusta tells Warren that she saw him running from the Capwell house the night of Channing's murder. She wants to know how many times he stole things from them. He says, just some gold coins and a few other things. He refused to tell her what the other things were, but says that she would approve if she knew what they were. Warren says he never wants to discuss it again or he'll leave the family.
Wow.
So, this is clearly more than just a few gold coins that he's stolen.
Yes, and it definitely, if he and Channing were friends, and then maybe weren't, we don't know, it definitely sheds some light on that relationship, that he was willing to steal from Channing's family and felt it was critical to do so.
I mean, it sounds like it's something that would benefit the Lockridge family or avoid from hurting the Lockridge family if he thinks Augusta would approve.
Yes.
It makes me wonder if it's the pawned items, because I thought if it's just documents, then he wouldn't pawn them.
Yes.
But he clearly hasn't pawned the gold coins, because he's still got those.
That's
right. So it must be something pawnable.
Yeah.
So that makes me wonder what it could be.
I'm wondering if, and I mean, this is obviously speculation, if maybe Channing was blackmailing him with something that could hurt the Lockridges, and Warren just grabbed a box full of whatever items would implicate the Lockridges, and it happened to have the gold coins in it as well, something like that. But I don't know why you would pawn that, so I don't know.
And it sounds like maybe he did steal a couple of times, so wondering if he was looking for something.
Yeah.
And grabbed some things, in a bag maybe or out of a safe. Wasn't able to look at them really till he got back home or something.
Yeah.
He didn't find what he was looking for the first time and tried again.
Yeah. But you're right, it couldn't just be for the monetary value, because the gold coins, you would think, would be something that they could definitely get some money for. So there must be a deeper reason than that.
Could it be something related to Lionel and Sophia?
Maybe.
I mean, if that's what Channing was talking about that would destroy them all, maybe Warren thought the same thing, that some evidence related to Lionel and Sophia would destroy the Lockridges too. But then why would Channing and him be fighting? It sounds like they would have the same goal in that area, unless the fight is about something completely different.
Yeah. Or if it would destroy, like, the Capwells if it went one way, or the Lockridges if it went the other. But I mean, it's really impossible to say until we know a little bit more about what was being pawned and the entire context of the situation.
I mean, it seems like Dominic knows that pawn shop was the one that matches the ticket.
Yeah.
And so that's suspicious. So I think Dominic would try to follow up on the
I think so, definitely.
In some way.
I think so.
Yeah, I think maybe we haven't seen the last of Rudy, the pawn shop owner.
No. Well, they have to find out what was pawned. So the records have been burned. So the only way to know is maybe to talk to Rudy, I would think.
Yeah.
Although why Rudy would remember after all these years, too.
Yeah. I can't imagine how it's going to go.
I don't know.
Perkins feared dead, lost at sea, says the headline of the newspaper. Kelly is actually phoning the newspaper to place a personal ad saying to Dominic that she wants to continue where Joe left off.
Yeah.
And Dominic eventually calls her and wants to meet at the warehouse. Kelly meets up with John Perkins and says that she believes Joe's innocent, that she's met the witness, and she thinks that they're coming close to finding the real killer.
Yeah.
So this is the first time John has really shown an indication of his willingness to consider the possibility that Joe was innocent.
Yes.
So a bit late now that he's dead.
Yes. Yes, it is. And I don't know if this is really just speculating on some aspect of John's personality or if there's some reason why he would almost prefer to think Joe guilty than for him to be innocent, if that, if there's some other aspect to this than that.
Mm-hmm.
But he does seem at least somewhat convinced by Kelly.
Yeah, it'll be interesting to see how things progress as Kelly gets more evidence with Dominic.
Mm-hmm.
Lionel is still at La Mesa watching Eden. He has lots of flashbacks of dancing with Sophia, played by Marcy Walker still. Augusta shows up and asks Lionel why he went to the Lockridge or the Capitol party the night Channing was killed.
Yeah, and I would think this is a bit of a bolt from the blue from Lionel because, why are they talking about this party that happened 5 years ago?
Mm-hmm. No, the only reason we know Lionel was there is from Dominic's interrogation of him.
That's right.
So Augusta has known this whole time.
Yeah.
She's known that Warren, was the thief. She knew that Warren ran away from that party that night, and she knew Lionel was at the party that night.
Mm-hmm.
So all of these things, feed into her, initial actions of trying to keep Joe Perkins out of town because she was worried that this whole thing would blow up in Lockridge's face.
My question is, it really seems to me like Augusta is very worried that a member of her family was involved in Channing's death.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm wondering why she feels that way, why that would be almost an assumption that she has.
It sounds like now that she believes Warren, she's switched her sights on Lionel being the guilty one.
She's obviously, being really dealing with this for the last 5 years. Like, it sounds like she has all sorts of theories she's been pondering her way through over the last 5 years.
Mm-hmm. Sally tells Eden who Lionel is, the man that's been sending her the notes, and she realizes, oh yeah, I guess it is him. I never really paid much attention the few times I saw him.
Yeah.
So,
because young girls don't usually pay that much attention to their elderly neighbors.
No. So, she sees Lionel with Augusta. Says, oh, that's his wife, I presume. So she writes a note for Lionel telling him this has to stop, puts it in her compact and leaves it on her table when she leaves the restaurant. Lionel finds the note and puts one of his own in there, and it's a note saying, meet me at your mother's grave at 11:30. So, we'll see how that works. Then Mason and Eden are chatting, and Mason casually mentions he knows that Eden's been taking money from her trust fund. This, that's part of a discussion about how she was able to afford a plane for Dad. So he's been spying on her, or if he hasn't been all along, he's started researching her when he saw the extravagant gift that she gave him and found this out after the fact.
I actually really love this exchange because it's kind of friendly, because they do have a bit of a friendly vibe, but they're very much needling each other too. And this is when we learn that Mason really sees Eden as a potential rival, not just for Dad's affection, but also perhaps in Capwell Industries.
Mm-hmm. He was asking her if she wanted to, work for the company. So this is a little bit reminiscent now of Fallon and Adam on Dynasty, wanting to work at the company.
It's kind of interesting too, actually, when you consider the differences between Kelly and Eden. With Eden, she's already had this whole life in Europe. She's come back. Mason twigs right away that she might be zeroing in on maybe playing a role in Capwell Industries. So we've got this whole sort of take on Eden as being ambitious and independent and perhaps potentially a bit of a player.
Mm-hmm.
Whereas with Kelly, her sister, everyone's just so upset that she's left home.
Mm-hmm.
Which actually is not an unusual thing for whatever she is, a 22-year-old, to do.
Mm-hmm.
So it's just kind of interesting, the difference there in
Yeah.
their roles and relationships.
Yeah, Eden's clearly more seen as the more, grown-up daughter.
Mm-hmm. They just seem to want to get Kelly married off well.
And then they discuss the fact that no one else in the family wants to talk about Cece and Santana.
Yeah.
Now Lionel hides out a bit at the graveyard, waiting for Eden to arrive. Luckily, there's some trees there. Kind of similar. Reminds me of all the graveyard scenes on Dark Shadows.
Mm-hmm.
People were wandering around, and other people were hiding. So he has left a gift for Eden on her mother's gravestone, on her mother's headstone. She opens it, and it's a necklace and a handkerchief.
Mm-hmm.
So, wonder what the significance of those is. These are not things, obviously, that he had given Sophia. Unless they're the things Warren stole, and somehow Lionel got them back from the pawn shop in the first place, and he's been storing them for 5 years.
Yeah, I mean, my assumption is they have some sort of connection with Sophia.
Mm-hmm. It just wants her to look more like Sophia did when you knew her.
Yeah, that
somehow.
would make that even creepier.
Yeah.
But the fact that he's giving it to her at her mother's grave, too.
Yeah, it's an interesting hangout place for him now.
Yeah.
But we know Dominic likes to hang out there too, so, they may be running into each other. Well, they did yesterday. Now, back at school, Mr. Bottoms gives Ted detention for instigating the class walkout yesterday, and Ted protests it's for a friend's family emergency. So Mr. Bottoms says that there's no excuse for not having discipline. And so he sentences Ted to pulling weeds in his garden.
So more quality education from Lyman.
He does talk a lot about plants. They come in with plants, but then he's freaked out when there's a bug or something on a leaf and makes Ted take it away. So it's kind of funny. But Ted decides to have some revenge against Mr. Bottoms for this detention, and he plans a prank. Throughout the episode, he tells Ted, Jade, and Danny and Lakin about his prank. When they meet with Jade to offer condolences, Jade still holds out hope that Joe might be alive. She says, he was a good swimmer, so we will see. Santana finally tells her parents about Cece, although I thought that Rosa was working at the party, so I'm not sure about that.
Well, Rosa did know, right? It was just
that's
Ruben
true.
They were telling you, basically.
So she
Ruben
told them
and Danny.
together, maybe so Rosa could have some plausible deniability that she found out at the same time as Ruben.
Well, no, because Rosa was, they alluded to the fact that she had been upset, and Santana was going to explain, the situation. I don't think Rosa was pretending not to know.
Oh, okay.
That wasn't my interpretation.
Ruben obviously is completely against it for many reasons. He says, "Remember when you were younger and Channing Jr. wanted to take you out? And I told you to stay away from him, and that worked out really well." So
yeah. He's obviously still not aware of
anything that's happened with his family.
Well. Yeah, it's sort of funny. In a way, it's almost a little bit like Mason, who prides himself on knowing everything, and yet there's these huge secrets taking place right under his nose. And Ruben, the disciplinarian and traditionalist, also there's these huge infractions taking place right under his nose.
I mean, he mentions, your mother and I worked for the Capwells, and he'll always never see you as an equal, and this probably is just a fling anyway. A lot of everything you can think of against it. So.
Yeah, I mean, and I, on some levels, I don't entirely disagree with them because I do find the whole relationship a bit icky, especially since Cece, launched into it by reminiscing about seeing Santana as a child. So.
Mm-hmm. Now, Ted asks Mason if the Lockridges were ever suspected in the theft of the gold coins 5 years ago. And that stuff that belonged to Sophia, he says. So we know a little bit more about the stuff Warren took just from that. So Mason, first of all, this comes out of nowhere. Why are you bringing up the thefts? And then when he asks about the Lockridges, he's like, why are you asking that? But he gets distracted by phone calls. But I think now Mason's going to start thinking, maybe we can get at the Lockridges another way. I don't know what Ted's found out, but Mason has clippings everywhere. He can research things. So.
Plus, Mason, seems to have put the idea in his head that, maybe they did have a bit more of a role in it than he initially thought.
Mm-hmm. So with Mason injected into the gold coin storyline, I think we're going to find out for sure. What was stolen and by whom and at what point.
Yeah.
Warren may end up even going to trial or something for that. The phone call that Mason has to take is someone informing him that the CIA is also in parallel searching for Joe Perkins, which annoys Mason because he didn't give any orders for any other outsiders to be called in. So he vows to find out who's behind that mission.
And I was wondering if in his role at the district attorney's office, if he would even have the authority to bring them in.
Yeah, I mean, he could request.
Yeah.
I guess if they help, but the CIA is not supposed to do any work within the country anyway, right? It's supposed to be, FBI would be within the country, and they're already using the Coast Guard search and rescue people. But I think the reason Cruz has brought them in is because they have satellites, and he wanted those.
And Cruz has a connection with them.
And I mean, clearly they've got some people on, available to help with the search. But who knows if they're actually physically searching or if they're just scanning photos for him back at, whatever CIA headquarters he's in contact with.
But what I'm thinking is that maybe Mason is also a little bit concerned because it means someone who has more of a connection with the CIA and possibly has more authority than he does.
It's definitely a higher level.
Is now involved in the Joe Perkins situation. So, first of all, that's going to be a little bit alarming for him because he's been running around just sort of throwing around his search warrants and, really acting like the big dog. So that's the first reason. And also, it means that if anyone finds out that he's being part of, planting evidence and stuff like that, that could actually have some pretty serious consequences.
And I think when he finds out that it's Cruz, and if Cruz even has one, well, Cruz already suspects that the drugs were planted, right? So, and I think he already even said he thought it was Mason. So he just needs to find a little bit of evidence for all the things that Mason actually did do. So. So Cruz is seen in communication with the CIA friends who are helping, and he says, "No one calls off the search but me." So obviously they've been searching for a long time, and the people involved are starting to think about giving up.
Yeah.
But Cruz does not want them to stop until they found Joe one way or the other. Even though if he was eaten by a shark, you would think. I guess sharks don't really eat people. They bite them and then spit them out. So you'd think they would find a body.
Well, I think I guess it depends. I always thought they did eat them.
I thought they don't like people. They usually bite them to test them to see what they are.
If they're actually some sort of seal or something.
Yeah. That's what I understand. Although, who knows? Laken and Augusta meet Summer, so she's now fully in the orbit of the Lockridge family. Warren wants to show Summer her grandmother's art collection.
Mm-hmm.
Augusta immediately starts saying negative things about the coupling.
Augusta is catty.
Warren tells Augusta about Summer's degree in art history. Oh, art history. Oh, that's one of those degrees. What do they call it? The MRS degree? Do they still call it that? So Warren bristles and says she got a job at the art museum with that degree. So then when they leave, Augusta says to Lincoln that Summer's too smart for him, and that's the reason. Seems to be against that coupling from the beginning. Later on, when Warren goes to pick Summer up from the Capwell Hotel, or maybe he just takes her there so she can change for their date, he meets Brandon, and Summer and Warren leave to go for dinner. Gina mentioned that she and Brandon are leaving town that night to go back to L.A. Santana shows up looking for Cece, and I guess she just missed him. So she gets back in the elevator. And then Gina can't find Brandon. And she finds his stuffed animal in the hallway at the hotel. And so she fears that Brandon has gone missing.
So we know that Brandon likes to ride around on elevators, so it may not be out of the question that he popped on the elevator while one of the others was coming and going.
Yeah, and Santana's in that elevator, so
Yeah.
I just see this is going to be an excuse for Santana and Brandon to have some elevator time together.
Yeah, that could be all it is. It could be something that maybe is a catalyst for other things. If Gina suspects that someone was trying to spirit Brandon away or something like that.
And yeah, we still don't know if she knows Santana's Brandon's real mother.
Yeah, so we don't know that either.
Maybe they'll get stuck in the elevator for a while.
That's
and
possible.
Start to bond, And
Yeah.
I don't know if Brandon has any information that he could accidentally spill to Santana that would make her realize.
Well, his
she's
birth
his
date,
son.
maybe?
Yeah, that's true. If they've given him the same birth date,
Yeah.
then that would be easy enough. So yeah, I feel they might get stuck in that elevator for a while just to make it, worth the time of having Gina be distressed by the whole thing.
Yeah, and just the setup of it, where it was mentioned several times during the little interlude with Warren and Summer at the presidential suite, that Brandon loves to ride on elevators. So I really feel he's on an elevator.
And actually, with Gina saying they're going back to L.A. tonight, that would be the end of it.
This is going to keep her
This
in
has
Santa
got to be the
Barbara.
way that things turn around 180.
Yeah.
And Gina and Brandon end up not leaving Santa Barbara. Because that's the only way Santana's going to move forward with her storyline of looking for her son. So
Yeah.
I think this is that last minute surprise that changes everything. So.
And I think this will, however it unfolds, will definitely change her relationship with CC as well, a little bit. I mean, because she started out using, her seductive wiles to try to get at CC and learn more about where her son is. She seems to have fallen a little bit in love with CC, at least that's what she's been saying. How would this sort of change that balance?
Now, I guess the question is, once she finds out Brandon's her son, she still has no claim over him, I guess. But if she did marry CC, she'd be legally her own son's grandmother, right? So,
yeah.
So, yeah. We'll see.
There's lots of ways that
see how
could
that
play
goes.
out.
Yeah, and
Plus,
of course,
whatever Cruz
Gina may
is
not want
finding
to
out
share
too.
her son, especially with
Well, no,
Stockman
she
dead.
probably
It's
won't.
just he's all she has now. So
I can definitely see her stirring up some trouble.
if she finds out Santana wants access to her son. All right, well, we will be back after we watch episode 52 of Santa Barbara.
Bye.
This week's Spotlight is on NBC. The National Broadcasting Corporation was founded in 1926 by RCA, the Radio Corporation of America. It is the oldest of the U.S. broadcast networks. The parent company of RCA was the General Electric Corporation, whose initials, GEC, make up the notes of the historic NBC chimes, first used in 1931 and still used today as an identifier. General Electric was forced to sell RCA and NBC in 1932. However, it subsequently purchased RCA again in 1986. Comcast purchased a large percentage of NBC in 2011 and the remainder in 2013. NBC started out with 2 radio stations, New York's WEAF and WJF in Washington. NBC ran 2 networks, Red and Blue. In 1927, NBC expanded to the West Coast, adding the Gold Network, carrying program from the Blue Network, and the Orange Network, carrying programming from the Red Network. In the 1930s, NBC ran the White Network over shortwave radio. In 1933, NBC moved its corporate headquarters into Rockefeller Center, where it remains today at 30 Rockefeller Plaza. In 1943, RCA was forced to sell the Blue Network, which became ABC, the American Broadcasting Company, in 1945. The Red Network became simply known as NBC. NBC first broadcast a television program over its network in 1940. Delayed by World War II, it wasn't until 1946 that NBC's television network began broadcasting a full schedule of programming. Many radio shows appeared simultaneously or were transferred to television. Network radio programming began to wind down in 1955, and by the mid-1960s, radio stations had little interest in network programming. Notable NBC radio programs included Edgar Bergen, Jack Benny, Burns and Allen, Bing Crosby, Fibber McGee and Molly, Death Valley Days. In 1929, NBC started to air The Goldbergs, a series that would run through 1956. Other early serials included 1931's Clara, Lou and Em, 1932's One Man's Family, and Judy and Jane, and 1933's Ma Perkins. Throughout the decades, NBC television has been home to hundreds of beloved series, including 30 Rock, Alf, The Cosby Show, Buffalo Bill, Car 54 Where Are You?, Café Americain, Cheers, Friends, The Days and Nights of Molly Dodd, Family Ties, Get Smart, The Golden Girls, Hidden Hills, I Dream of Jeannie, The Monkees, News Radio, Sanford and Son, Seinfeld, The Torkelsons, Trial and Error, Will and Grace, Misfits of Science, The A-Team, Bionic Woman, Brett Maverick, Cliffhangers, Columbo, Crime Story, Dark Shadows, The Girl from U.N.C.L.E., Heroes, I Spy, Hill Street Blues, The Magician, Macmillan and Wife, Peter Gunn, Remington Steele, The Rockford Files, Sunny Spoon, St. Elsewhere, Star Trek, and The Flintstones. NBC's best-known series was called Super Train. NBC Television's only long-running serials were Another World, The Doctors, Santa Barbara, Passions, and the still-running Days of Our Lives.
Welcome back to Misha and Dianne Watch Santa Barbara, Week 11.
Hello.
We've watched episode 52, aired originally on October 9th, 1984. Eden thanks Lionel for the gift. Lionel is still hiding in the trees, of course, so she's thanking him just by calling out to him, but threatens to go to the police if he doesn't show himself. Now, she knows it's
who
Lionel
he is.
Lockridge,
Yeah.
so it's weird that Lionel's still hiding. So anyway, she eventually gives up and leaves the gift there and leaves. So Lionel tells Sophia that he has a lot to make up for and he'll do it through her daughter.
Mm-hmm.
And he tells Sophia he has found a way to recoup the Lockridge fortune. You'd be very proud of me, he says.
Wow, that's exciting.
Yeah, so I don't know what he's thought of.
No. He's obviously got something up his sleeve.
There haven't been any clues, I don't think.
No. But he's got a big intellect, so...
I mean, maybe it doesn't have anything to do with the Capwells.
It may not, no.
So Lionel goes home. He's kind of discombobulated from his day, but he gives Augusta the gift instead. And she puts on the scarf and necklace, and he sees her in the mirror as Sophia, played by Marcy Walker, and then he kisses Augusta.
Yeah.
So I don't know what's going on in his head. Kelly tells Dominic about Joe being missing, presumed dead, and asks why he won't come forward to exonerate Joe.
Yeah.
Dominic says not until the real killer is found.
Hmm.
So Dominic mentions that the pawn ticket that Joe had found is from Rudy's pawn shop where the fire was the night before, and wonders who might have known about the pawn ticket. Kelly thinks Joe might have told Augusta or Cruz, but she doesn't think Cruz could be problematic, but perhaps Augusta.
And I'm wondering if the reason Dominic doesn't want to come forward is because Dominic knows that she will probably be sent back, to a hospital or something as soon as her identity is revealed.
Mm-hmm.
And she wants to at least see this one thing through before that happens.
So Kelly meets up with Warren somewhere. I can't remember where. I think this is their first scene together.
It is, yeah. We haven't seen this before.
Yeah.
They must know each other a bit. I mean, they're sort of roughly the same
Neighbors,
age, and
might have been at school.
they reminisce a bit about the fact that Warren used to hang out a bit with Channing, but we've never really seen this kind of interaction before.
Yeah. So Kelly mentions she knows Warren and Lionel were at the party that night, but was Augusta there?
Mm-hmm.
So Warren thinks that's an odd question. That says no, she wasn't. And then Kelly says that she knows Joe didn't kill Channing, and that there's a lot of clues. And so Warren says, "Oh, what kind of clues?" But at this point, since Kelly's suspecting Augusta, she says she'd rather not tell him. But then Warren must think that Kelly suspects Augusta too, because she specifically asked about Augusta. So I'm thinking now maybe there'll be a reversal, and Warren will think Augusta's the killer and start covering for her. But that doesn't really make sense, because why would she think he was the killer?
He's troubled by this conversation, though. You can tell that wasn't... he starts out the evening on a hot date with Summer, and he ends up looking for a missing boy and having this disturbing conversation with Kelly, so it's not what he expected.
Actually, it's probably now he's got the same idea in his head that Augusta does, that Lionel is the killer.
Yeah,
because if he knows it wasn't Augusta from the way she thought it was him, then they probably both will start covering things up, assuming it's Lionel, but without ever knowing for sure. So Mason, still trying to track his mother down, finds a number that she had in New York, but she moved out 6 months ago. And turns out she's been on the West Coast somewhere for 6 months.
So we might see her.
Ted comes in to borrow a horse trailer. Now he and Danny have got some breaking into places gear on, knit caps and black clothing, and in the car they both put some cork on their faces to make themselves stand out less in the dark, and Danny starts to sing Mammy, as you do when you're blacking up your face.
Yeah.
So they break into the zoo, steal a camel, and put it in Mr. Bottom's classroom. It's the entire episode, basically. So a lot of wackiness about them trying to move the camel, and who's going to leave the camel where, etc. So
it made me think that these were more innocent times, because nowadays you would post something viral online and ruin the teacher's reputation. But they settle for a little prank with a camel.
And the camel starts nibbling at some of the plants in the classroom before the scene ends. I don't know if that was on purpose or by accident, but I suspect all those precious plants of Mr. Bottom's will be ruined. I can't see how he wouldn't suspect Ted.
And I can't see how this is, in the long run, going to end well for Ted.
Right. I mean, Mason will possibly mention to Cece that he borrowed a horse trailer the night that a camel was transported from the zoo to the very classroom that Ted and 7 others stay in. So
It made me wonder if military school was a little bit more of a possibility in Ted's future after this.
Danny says he's going to try and figure out a way to be in that classroom to see Mr. Bottom's face. So we might see him visiting Lyman tomorrow.
Yeah.
Veronica's checking the liquor levels to make sure Peter's office is all stocked up with liquor. So 1984, not too different from Mad Men era.
Yeah.
Ginger enters and says she has an appointment with Peter, and Veronica, I think, probably either knows if that's true or not, because she sets his appointments, but she lets Ginger in, and Peter shows up a bit late and gives Ginger $10,000. Now, previously, Ginger had said she wasn't going to take installments, but she says, "Oh, I'll be back tomorrow for another $10,000." So
Yeah.
clearly they've come to an agreement. But I don't see why he doesn't just write 5 checks for $50,000 if he's going to do it that way anyway.
Well, it looked like he was preparing to do that at one point, didn't it?
Well,
He
but
grabbed
why
the
only give
book,
her $10,000,
yeah.
you know, and then now he's written himself a check for another $10,000. So.
Yeah.
Mason comes in and meets Ginger, and Mason says, "Who is that?" And Peter says, "Oh, that's Kelly's new dressmaker."
Mm-hmm.
And Mason says, "Do you know any scullery maids?" So Mason wants to know where Peter got the cocaine that he used to frame Joe. He says he confiscated it from a student years ago when he was teaching at Lyman, and there's no more.
I did wonder when Mason was going to start thinking about those sorts of things.
Mm-hmm. He's not leaving, any holes unplugged, though. He's
Yeah.
very methodical. He also mentions they called off the search for the night, and says there's very little chance of finding him. And Peter says, "I meet with no champagne on hand."
Yeah.
So then Mason decides he needs to dig at Peter a little more when he notices Veronica. Says, "How's Veronica's raise doing?" And Peter says he hasn't gotten around to it yet. So, what about the new additional duties that you promised you would have? He says, "Oh, I haven't gotten around to that yet." So Peter's annoyed by that. He writes himself a check once Mason leaves, and Veronica says at 7:30, "How much longer are we planning to stay?" And he's like, "When you have these extra duties, you're going to be expected to work late all the time."
So I think he's going to make life a little bit uncomfortable for her, to earn this extra salary.
Even with Joe gone, he's still in a crabby mood, probably because of Ginger. But
yeah, well, that would have been unsettling for him, having Mason, who works in the deputy district attorney's office, and Ginger in the same room, and now there's a very obvious connection between Peter and Ginger. Ginger must have a massive criminal record, so all Mason has to do is check up on her, and then he might find the connection with Peter.
And his if he does find out, his decision may be to help Ginger get rid of Peter.
Yeah.
Cece tells Gina that they'll find Brandon. Goes over to see her and finds out that Santana was there just before Brandon vanished. So then Cece pretends he has a meeting and runs over to Santana's place and basically, comes up with an excuse to search her apartment, saying, "Oh, I saw someone skulking around in the back when I was parking. So let me just do a quick sweep and make sure everything's okay." And searches her apartment for Brandon. And of course, she doesn't know anything about where Brandon is. So she thinks it's a bit weird and offers him a drink. He says, "Nope, no time, I gotta go." So he goes back to the hotel, and before he gets there, Kelly and Peter arrive to help with the search, and Mason arrives and wants to know all the details about Brandon, height, birthday, etc. And Peter, meanwhile, starts recording. No, he does that later. But But we find out, Mason finds out that Brandon was born in Acapulco, among other things. So I think that's probably the key bit of information.
Yeah.
That if it gets to Santana, she'll realize it's her son.
And I think this little encounter in this episode between Cece and Santana has probably unsettled Santana a little bit, and I think will raise her suspicions a little bit as well. Maybe not specifically about this, but it was a weird visit that Cece had suddenly shown up, searched her apartment under very flimsy premise, and left.
So Mason now calls Santana, not knowing Cece's already on his way back to the hotel, asks to talk to Cece, and says, the FBI might have to get involved. Assuming that Cece's told Santana about Brandon, because why wouldn't he?
Yeah.
And Santana has no idea what he's talking about.
Yeah.
And he said, because Brandon's been kidnapped. So that's very odd, obviously, if Cece was just there and didn't mention this thing. So that's, I think Santana, when she realizes everything, she's going to be upset with Cece.
Yeah.
So Peter starts recording once Cece arrives, and records Cece and Gina together. And once they're the only ones in the room, they start talking about the adoption. And Cece reminds Gina that she promised she would keep that a secret forever.
So Peter knows a little bit about the agreement now between Cece and Gina as well.
So now Peter's obviously going to try and figure out a way to use this. Gina's rich, right?
Yeah.
Maybe he'll try to blackmail Gina to try and get $250,000 so he can pay off Ginger.
That's a possibility.
That way he doesn't have to look bad in front of Cece by trying to get the money from him. But, that's an idea.
Now Peter makes another important discovery when he goes into the little room to start this recording, which is...
He finds Brandon asleep on a bunch of towels, because this is, after all, one of the linen closets on that floor.
Yeah.
He says, I can't let them come in here.
No.
So he quickly goes to the other linen closet across the hall, makes a little fake little bed there out of linen, similar to the one Brandon's actually on, obviously for later when they ask, where did you find him? And then he goes over and gets Brandon and brings him in and says, look who I found sleeping in the linen closet.
Yeah. Now, Brandon, of course, starts coming around a little bit and starts saying, I saw, people talking through the mirror. And, Peter stays around and says, no, he's just sleepy, he's just been dreaming. But, it comes pretty close to incriminating Peter's little spy operation.
Yeah, we, all these little things probably be filed away, and Mason wasn't there. So
no, he's the one who would really have put it together.
Cece doesn't really have any reason to think that he doesn't know anything about bugging or anything in that room. So, John can't get over that Kelly now thinks Joe is innocent. Yeah. He's with Jade and Marissa, and they're also talking about hurricanes on the news too. I don't know if that's something we have to worry about, or if that's just extraneous dialogue for when they have the news on. But that's 2 days in a row they've mentioned the hurricanes just as people are turning off the news. And he offers to spend the night at the Perkins, and Marissa agrees. Cruz phones and says that they've called off the search. And John said, Kelly told us that the search was called off for the evening.
Yeah.
But Cruz says, I'm not so sure that they're going to restart it in the morning. They might be giving up completely. So then they cut to Joe Perkins, unconscious in the bottom of a boat.
Yes.
It's like a rowboat, I guess.
And we don't see the people he's with. One of them seems to be in a blue dress with an ankle bracelet.
There's a man and a woman talking, and they're talking in Russian. Now, the question is, are they really talking in Russian, or is this copy of this episode of Santa Barbara sourced from a Russian TV station? But I think we're still watching the French ones based on where the logo is blurred out. So I'm pretty sure this was originally French print. So if the Russian is on there, I think that's the actual Russian dialogue.
We should know when we watch next episode. I'm sure they'll reprise it a little bit, or we'll see sort of where that scene leads.
Yeah, I mean, once Joe wakes up and starts talking to them, they'll either be talking with Russian accents or they won't. So. And that's pretty much it for this episode. A lot of different things happened to several different storylines.
Yeah, a lot of different pieces sort of hanging in the air right now.
And yet still time for a camel subplot, too.
Yeah, it'll be really fun to see what happens when that camel is discovered.
Mm-hmm. So we will be back after we've watched episode 53 of Santa Barbara.
See you later.
Welcome back to Misha and Dianne Watch Santa Barbara.
Hello.
It is week 11 and we've watched episode 53, originally aired October 10th, 1984. Joe awakens and meets the Russians.
Mm-hmm.
There's a man and a woman. They're in a
Yes.
boat. Woman seems to be in charge.
They claim to be Yugoslavian tourists.
Yes, which we don't really buy right from the beginning.
We do remember in, I think it was the previous episode or the one before, that Cruz was talking about spies spotted off the coast of Santa Barbara.
So they, the woman sends the captain, I guess, out to get some supplies or something. He comes back with a newspaper and points a gun at Joe, and the lady says, "Oh, are you Joe Perkins?" He says, "Yep, but I'm innocent." So anyway, she convinces the captain to not hold a gun on Joe, and they say they'll give him some money and drop him off up the coast after dark.
Yep.
So that's that.
That's that.
Mr. Bottoms finds the camel in his room and faints.
I believe your comment was that he reacted far more dramatically than a normal person would to seeing a camel, which I would agree with.
He was originally distraught that his plants had been chewed up, but then when he spots the camel, he faints, and he vows revenge against the circus at one point. He thinks Danny might be involved in the circus at some point. Was it a circus, or... It wasn't a zoo, by the way. It was some sort of traveling circus, I think they said. So
He doesn't seem to notice that it is wearing a Lyman banner.
Oh, I didn't see that.
I believe it is.
Ted had tried to make a whole bunch of potential theories about how a camel could have gotten in there. Perhaps the janitor left the door unlocked, and Mr. Bottoms says, "Well, I just unlocked it, so it wasn't left unlocked." So anyway, I think he'll figure out that Ted did it quite quickly.
Yeah, I think so. I don't think Ted will necessarily hide it that well either.
I just remembered how important the circus is to the story.
Oh.
I totally didn't put two and two together until I was thinking about it. Warren has dreams about his conversations with Kelly and Augusta. He's trying to put things together in his head. He now has the coins in his strongbox locked in his locker at work.
Mm-hmm.
He mentions that the last thing that can connect him to Channing, now that he's burned down the pawn shop. Augusta tells him that Kelly is investigating, taking up where Joe left off.
Mm-hmm.
And she says, Kelly can go into Channing's room whenever she wants.
Yeah.
She can investigate a whole lot more quickly. So Warren says he's tired of her overprotectiveness. Summer tells Kelly that Warren is taking her apartment hunting.
Mm-hmm.
And during that conversation, Summer mentions that Warren burned his hand. So I'm wondering if Kelly and Dominic will put two and two together.
And calculate that he might have been involved in the fire at the warehouse where the pawn shop records were stored.
Mm-hmm. So when Kelly hears that Summer is seeing Warren Lockridge, he does the usual Capwell thing of Lockridge, and Summer says, "Oh, I've heard about your feud. Is it really that bad?" And Kelly says, "Well, I guess I don't hate Warren." So,
yeah.
Then at the end of his shift, Warren takes the box of coins out of his locker, runs smack into Summer, and the box falls and breaks open and spills gold coins everywhere.
Yeah.
Now, as an art historian, perhaps Summer will immediately recognize these as coins from the such and such, wreck that
Yeah.
was, off the coast of Santa Barbara 50 years ago or something.
I was wondering why he had them in his locker at the beach joint.
It started first thing in the morning,
Yeah.
right? Because the kids were at school and there was only one other guy at work setting up tables. So I'm wondering if he just shoved it in there when he got there. But no, he was changing, so it was already in there from the night before. I don't know.
I just thought, if this was something he was really concerned about someone finding, wouldn't you bury it in the backyard or something like that?
I was thinking that he took them to work so that he could deal with it after work.
Maybe that was it.
Without having to run home. Although, maybe he didn't want to leave it in his apartment unattended. So this way he could keep an eye on it. Cece thanks Peter for finding Brandon.
Yeah.
Cece still doesn't know any of the bad things about Peter. So
No.
I guess in Cece's eyes, Peter's better off than Mason. So
Yeah.
And Peter mentions, I was, looking all over in and out of the rooms, and I overheard you tell Gina that Brandon was adopted, or vice versa. And so Cece is shocked that Peter heard that. I said, I didn't know you were in the room. That's a secret. You mustn't tell anyone. So it's interesting that he brings that up to Cece. I assume it's to get on his good side by keeping the secret or something.
Yeah, and I thought maybe it was maybe he had a little bit of a feeling, since he saw it from behind the hidden, the two-way mirror, that maybe this was going to be important. And, he's trying to find a source of money for his problems with Ginger. Maybe he was just putting out feelers to see if this was something that might be blackmail material or that might lead to something he could use. I don't know. He had a little smile on his face after CC reacted that way. So it made me think that he felt that he could use this somehow.
Or he realized that it was as valuable as he suspected.
Yeah.
So then he immediately calls Mason over. Mason's not, too happy to be summoned to his office, but he shows up. And Mason tries to sell him the information.
Peter tries to sell Mason.
Peter tries to sell Mason the information. It's a secret about your dad.
Yeah.
That's all I'm going to tell you. I need $230,000 and your promise not to badmouth me in front of the family anymore. So Mason notices that the prices come down from $250,000. He goes, if I wait long enough, I can have your secret for $5.
Yeah.
So Ginger arrives. She gets her $10,000 of the day and says, I wish you'd come back to work for me while you've still got your looks. Now Cruz has somehow pulled out some even more impressive communications equipment.
Yeah.
That's working in conjunction with the unit in the briefcase. So we find out from the voice on the other end that Operation Genesis has attracted some Eastern Bloc representatives. So right away, think, there's some Yugoslavian people out on a boat. They said they'd rescued Joe a mile offshore.
Yeah.
So instead of Cruz looking for those people, I guess Cruz is looking for something else that those people are also looking for.
Yeah.
So it sounds like something may have sunk, maybe a nuclear sub or something.
Maybe.
That they're trying to, both sides are trying to get the ATAC device off the computer. They also mentioned that they've got to call off the search for Joe. So, Kelly shows up to tell Cruz she's taken over where Joe left off, and of course Cruz thinks it's dangerous, and also doesn't want her to just trust Dominic outright.
Yeah.
To be careful. Dominic is putting on her mustache and tears up the Jane Doe folder. She tears up the folder itself, too, just to make it more difficult to tear up, I guess. But there doesn't, just like the folders at the pawn shop, they seem to be very empty.
There's not much in them,
Maybe there's just one sheet about Jane Doe from Santa Barbara.
Yeah.
And then Kelly and Dominic meet at Dominic's apartment, which is very interesting. 'Cause
Yeah.
I guess Dominic figures Joe knew where she lived, so might as well make that the meeting place and
Yeah,
stop
it's
meeting
nicer
in a
than
warehouse.
a warehouse.
But then you also wonder, what else did Joe tell Kelly, because Dominic's still pretending to be a man, right?
Yeah, and I was sure he had told Kelly that Dominic was a woman, but
He phoned.
Maybe
Did he see her after he got back from Alaska, or did he phone her with them? Anyway, I guess you're right. I think when he phoned, he said Dominic was a woman. So yeah, so I'm not sure if Kelly's just holding on to that, or Joe already told Dominic that he knows she's a woman. So I don't know, but they're meeting in a nicer place, and it's probably a cheaper set to make than the warehouse, because it's just a desk and a mirror, and they just have to stand in front of that, and it can be set up in the corner of the studio. And they can use that warehouse set for Russian boats or something if they need. So now Santana tells Mason that she thought it was so odd that Cece came over but didn't mention Brandon being missing. And then she complains to Rosa that Cece is spending half his time with Gina.
Yeah.
So at this point, she's thinking Gina is the big draw for Cece.
Yeah.
And she says, maybe I could give Cece a son. I think Rosa didn't particularly think that was a great idea.
No. I mean, Rosa's not thrilled about her seeing CC to begin with. So
then Cece comes over to apologize and says that he was acting weird because he was all worried about Brandon, and that he didn't tell her about Brandon because he didn't think it was relevant to her. And then he quickly gives her a gift to stop her thinking about it. She said, well, this will make up for this time and the next. So whatever it was, it seems to be quite valuable. Then when he leaves, she's wondering what's bothering him so much, because he's still very bothered. Mason shows up and says to Santana that Cece is over-concerned with Gina since Stockman died. Now, this is Mason clearly trying to make Santana jealous about Gina.
Yeah.
So, and then just to throw in some more of his gleaned knowledge, he says, oh, did you know Brandon is adopted?
And that really gets Santana thinking.
Yeah, so not until she gets home and drinks some, looks like iced tea, does she really start to think that perhaps Brandon might be her son.
Yeah.
So I think Brandon is her son, so that works
so
out well.
Too.
So that is it for episode 53.
I have to say, just one of the things I find sort of ironic about this episode, I think it's really shown particularly, is that Cece is so desperate that people don't suspect anything with Gina, and that whole secret is just kind of laid to rest and no one really finds out. But it's actually his own behavior that is almost like this flashing sign that people are getting really curious. The fact that he snaps at Peter and says, oh no, that's a secret, don't tell anyone. And the fact that he behaves so weirdly around Santana, first when the child goes missing, and, then later in trying to make up for his weird behavior when the child goes missing after Brandon, of course, is successfully found. I mean, those are the things that are really making people suspicious. If he hadn't acted that way, people probably wouldn't be as, quite as suspicious about it.
Yeah, I think it's interesting that several people now have all of the pieces. Cruz, Peter, Santana, even Mason. So between them all, I don't think this is going to be a secret much longer.
No, I don't either. I'd also like to say that I really appreciated that the first 4 scenes of this particular episode featured naked men in bed.
Right, Warren was dreaming in bed. He had no shirt on, and then
of course
we cut to
Joe.
He was waking up shirtless in a bed on the freighter. And then both Ted and Danny started the episode on the phone with each other in bed, and wondering how the camel was doing in the room that they'd locked
And
the
both
night before.
shirtless as well. So we're in full soap opera territory now.
Yeah, well, summer's over. You have to come up with other reasons for people to be shirtless, although Warren's still wearing his shorts at work. So, speaking of summer, the day, not the woman, the season. So Santana, or Gina, reiterates that Brandon just turned 5 recently. So this goes back to our story, our discussion of exactly when was Brandon born, so that Santana could write Channing a letter about Cece taking him. And the only thing I can think of is that maybe when Santa Barbara started on July 30th, it was actually not July in Santa Barbara, because the summer storyline with the kids in Hollywood
it took a
went
long
into
time.
mid-September.
Yeah.
So let's say that maybe the first episode of Santa Barbara took place just on the first day of summer. So 5 years minus a month after Channing was killed. That would give a month of time for Santana to have had the baby, and also Channing to be murdered then, and her to have sent one letter to him about the adoption, I guess.
And we know that Brandon's birthday did take place at some point, fairly early on in the show, because we see Santana very lovingly wrapping a little gift for him.
So I think if we just shift the the August and September episodes back 3 or 4 weeks, then it could all fit in. No one mentioned the 4th of July, so maybe it all started on the 5th of July or something.
Yeah, maybe something like that.
So, and then, as it is with soap operas, the days don't often line up with real life.
No.
And sometimes a day can take months. I mean, Cece's birthday was at least 3 days.
Yes, that's right.
And then the day after his birthday has been Joe, right? He's only been missing 1 day, and it's been a few episodes. So,
yeah.
So it's starting to drag, and then they'll suddenly skip X number of days. So I think we have some leeway thinking that, yes, Brandon was born. Santana had time to write at least one letter afterwards, before Channing was murdered. And that would explain why she didn't look pregnant at his party.
Yes. Yeah.
So, all right. Well, we've got episode 54 coming up, and maybe we'll meet some circus people.
Oh, that'll be fun. See that camel again, too.
Yeah, they'll have to take him back to the circus. So maybe we'll meet the next Peaches and Jake. We will see you in a day for us, but a few minutes for you, a few seconds for you, after we watch episode 54 of Santa Barbara.
Bye-bye.
Welcome back.
Hello.
We've watched episode 54 of Santa Barbara. Originally aired October 11th, 1984. Now, Joe's on board the Russian ship, and he finds a map. He notices that the map opens up to reveal some communications equipment hidden behind it. This is similar looking to what Cruz has. Joe quickly closes up the map when he hears some noise, and later on thanks them for lending him a shirt and goes to leave, but the male Russian notices that the map door is ajar and pulls a gun on him. The woman says to tie him up, and as he starts, Joe manages to escape and heads out.
Yes. So we assume that Joe will get off the ship, I guess.
I don't know if he's going to try swimming for it again.
Yeah.
Maybe they're close enough to shore now, or I don't know if that captain is the only other person on board. But yeah, I guess it's possible they'll recapture Joe, because if he can't dive into the ocean, he's going to have to try to fight them again.
Yeah.
Meanwhile, Summer, who's just knocked over all of Warren's coins, helps him pick them up, and she says, "Oh, these are from Spanish galleons." And he says he's been collecting them for years. She mentions they're quite valuable, and he swears her to secrecy. He's very adamant about that, and she's not taking it seriously enough for his liking.
in a way, I think he's almost making the same mistake that CC was making regarding Santana's baby, in that he's kind of protesting too much. He's trying to control the situation too much, and by doing so, I think could quite possibly arouse more suspicion than he needs to.
So, not being one to get more cautious, he gets drunk. And then he starts saying things to Summer like, Kelly may have paid her to get him drunk to find out about all his family's secrets.
Yeah.
That go all the way back to her brother, which is a bizarre thing to add when you're trying to hide that very thing.
Yes. We also learned that Warren is not really a happy drunk.
No. So Summer obviously does not take kindly to first of all, his bizarre behavior and his weird insinuations. So she leaves.
Yeah.
Eden gets another necklace from Lionel. And then Lionel gets out an old trunk and pulls out a model of a sailing ship and some 100-year-old charts.
Yeah.
And he spends a good part of the episode with a compass trying to triangulate things. So I'm thinking he's going to go diving for a wreck that's full of gold coins so that he can replenish the Lockridge fortune.
It seems like he's got something like that in mind. He definitely came up with an idea. We don't know quite why his interaction with Eden was the catalyst, but it was. And he thinks he has their money problem solved.
So, yeah, I guess there's a wreck that he knows about that maybe no one else does.
Maybe.
Otherwise, they'd be looking for it too.
Yeah.
It seems to be an old family trunk, so and maybe that's the ship that the model is of.
Yeah,
maybe it's
maybe.
a family vessel from the olden days. So that's another thing. What kind of claim do you have on treasure? I'm not sure what the law is, but if it's actually a Lockridge ship that went down 100 years ago, then the family might have a 100% claim on whatever's on board.
I'm wondering if this could have any connection at all with Warren's coins.
Yeah.
Because they could have been cargo on an old ship, potentially. And maybe it was something that Channing had uncovered somehow and was investigating, maybe to see if there could be a claim on behalf of the Capwells.
Yeah. I think there might be some link too, but maybe it's just a coincidence. But the Spanish galleon coins. So yeah, Spanish galleons specifically was mentioned by Summer. So. And
apparently the coins that Summer picked up are worth a lot of money. So
yeah, one of them was $50,000.
Yeah. So if Warren wasn't so concerned about being connected with the robbery and such, I mean that could actually have helped his family out of their financial problems.
So Minx walks in and says she needs a ride to La Mesa. Where's Ambrose? Asks Lionel. He's gone to Australia for a while. So we've only seen Ambrose, I think, twice, and now he's already off the show, I guess.
Yeah, and this is just a hint that Minx has something in mind, something she's been working on. She doesn't want her son to know anything about it, so it's some little plan she's concocted.
So he takes her to La Mesa, and she won't let him stay to have a drink.
Yeah.
She says, come back in 2 hours. And he asks if this was what all the phone calls were about, and she says yes. So, and she also says at some point that she's taken over the Lockridge company too, right? So that's, I don't know if that's related or a side thing. So Minx is waiting for someone, and a man called Barnaby comes in. Barnaby Wallace, and Minx has a Polaroid in her purse, which she checks, and she says, yes, that's him.
Yeah.
And he introduces himself. She calls him Barnaby Wallace, but he says that people call him Brick. I have to say, for 35 years, I thought that was the dumbest nickname anyone could have, because he didn't look particularly muscular.
Mm-hmm.
And it just occurred to me before we started recording, Brick Wallace. That's why his nickname is Brick. It took me 35 years to figure out that gag, because I was focused on the fact that Barnaby started with a B.
Yeah.
And I just never got my head around that nickname correctly.
You have to admit, Brick is actually kind of a soap opera-like name.
Yeah. Yeah, so, yeah, it's just always been weird to me. So they talk about the fact that she says, someone tried to get your transcripts from UCLA, but you rejected the request. So clearly the someone is her. And,
yes.
He says, well, I don't like people snooping in my business. And then she pulls out his transcripts from McGill.
Yeah.
She says, I don't know why he left England, because Montreal was so much colder. So she has his transcripts from when he went to school in England as well. So she's clearly researched him quite thoroughly. And he obviously wonders what she wants with him.
And so do we. I mean, I have to admit, going into this episode, when I heard she was meeting with someone, this was not at all what I expected. I thought maybe she was meeting with a few board members or a few shareholders or something like that on company business. But this is completely
unexpected. This has
unexpected.
come out of nowhere.
Yeah.
But then she does say to him, I need a chauffeur. So I don't know if this is just a spur-of-the-moment thing that she has come up with, since Lionel said, if Ambrose is gone, we should get a new chauffeur.
Yeah.
Maybe she's decided to offer him that job, but that wasn't her original plan.
I thought maybe she had sent Ambrose away.
Oh, maybe specifically
and perhaps, concocted this, maybe gave him a really nice, retirement package. He did look a little bit older, and sent him off to Australia so she could bring in Brick.
But it seems like someone who's gone to school at numerous universities and has, I don't know if she said degrees, but studied art history, I think was one, which everyone seems to be studying in Santa Barbara, that a chauffeur would really be a job they would jump at, necessarily.
But we don't know much about Brick at all.
No.
He's obviously had the means, one way or another, to go to all of these prestigious schools.
Yeah. So, it would be interesting if he does take the job. Why would he?
Yeah, and why does she want him specifically? We don't know why this was the person she picked, because it doesn't seem like he had contacted her before. He didn't really seem to know who she was. It's not like he had applied for a job with her or anything like that.
But I'm thinking, based on the fact that she had requested his transcript and he declined him, that it wasn't just today.
No.
That it's been a little while that she's been working on getting his information.
Yeah, she's had him in her sights for a while.
If Ambrose, was still around then, unless, as you say, she sent him away, I don't know how the chauffeur thing can really tie in if she's already been investigating him. So anyway, there's a new cast member, so we'll find out more about Barnaby Wallace as the weeks unwind. Now Kelly shows up to ask Augusta if Joe may have told her anything that could help her find the real killer, and she mentions to Augusta that she knows all about Augusta's relationship with Joe.
Yeah.
And Augusta says, well, aren't we modern? But thinking back on it, I don't think she and Joe talked about it. I suspect this is only based on what she witnessed when she got stuck in the fence that day.
Yeah,
she saw Augusta
sense.
feeling Joe's face, and I think she just inferred what happened.
Plus, we can also infer that Augusta has a bit of a reputation for playing around when Lionel's not around. So it may have seemed to Kelly like a typical Augusta situation as well.
So then Kelly starts immediately with, Warren was at our house the night Channing was killed. And Augusta says, a lot of people were there. So Kelly doesn't really get anything from Augusta, but she gets a bit of a negative
Yeah.
vibe from it,
Yeah.
though. It's like Augusta's not trying to help clear Joe anymore. I think
No,
now
no.
she thinks he's dead. She can drop the pretense.
Yeah, that's right.
So I think that can only make Kelly suspicious. Because why was Augusta trying to be so helpful to Joe?
That's right.
So after Kelly leaves, Warren arrives drunk, and he starts muttering about coins everywhere, and he pulls out the coins and does some magic tricks, and they go flying, and basically tells Augusta that Summer saw everything, and so Augusta basically says, "Well, we have to keep this quiet. So no one must know." And Warren says, "Don't forget Summer."
Mm-hmm.
So
Seems kind of ominous to me, but we'll see.
I
how
know it
unfolds.
makes me think. If something happens to Summer, the viewers would suspect Augusta of having tried to.
if Summer
to,
suddenly falls
shut
off
her
a
up.
cliff or
Yeah.
something. Yeah.
So that could just be a soap opera style red herring where
Yeah.
we think Augusta's done something to Summer, but something else has happened. But she seems to have, only been on the show a few days, so I doubt that they
Well,
would-
we know Augusta will go quite far to protect Warren,
Mhm.
because in the very first episode we saw, she had hired some thugs to intimidate Joe Perkins
Mhm.
away from Santa Barbara.
Yeah, I think she will target Summer in some way.
Mm-hmm.
Maybe not violence, maybe try to get her fired and sent back to LA
Yeah.
or something.
We'll see.
She may have some pull at the museum. So, Lionel then comes home and tells Augusta that Minx might be having an affair with a younger man. I was expecting Minx and Barnaby to walk in, actually.
Yeah, that
when
would have been
happened.
fun.
So, and then Augusta follows through with Warren robbed the Capwells and was involved in the murder.
Yeah.
And all Lionel can say to that is, "Are you crazy?"
Yeah, Lionel's not having any of that. And he's kind of off in his own little world, as I guess is typical for Lionel. He's got this scheme involving the maps and somehow replenishing the family fortune, and then he's got this other strange little project he's pursuing with Eden. So he's really quite preoccupied with other things right now.
Yeah, we'll leave it to Augusta to figure out how her family's involved in the murder,
Yeah.
prevent people from finding out. Ruben and Cece have an awkward talk.
Yeah.
Cece says, Santana has brought a light into my life that hasn't been there since Sophia died. But Ruben counters with, you have 2 daughters, you must know how I feel. And then Mason arrives, and Ruben takes, I think, the opportunity to leave quickly.
Yeah, I don't think Ruben is really enjoying this conversation very much.
So Mason's a bit, anxious about where his mother might be. He wonders if Cece actually has any idea where she is. Mason hasn't actually seen her in 6 years, and last talked to her, I think he said 2 years ago.
Mm-hmm.
So, but Cece has no idea.
Yeah.
Eden shows up and says she wants to... first she asks about Lionel Lockridge.
Mm-hmm.
And between Mason and Cece, they rattle off a huge list of negative attributes.
Yeah.
They're quite hilarious. And then Eden says she'd like to join Capwell Enterprises. So I think right away Mason might be a bit on edge that she's maybe going to get a plum position from Daddy.
Yeah, I mean, CC seems quite enchanted with the idea, and he sort of whisks her off to talk about some new project Capwell Industries is working on, and Mason kind of immediately goes into a bit of a sulk over it.
I mean, Eden says, I'll start at the bottom, and Cece says that's perfect, but it's probably Capwell bottom, not,
Yeah.
she'll be Peter's boss,
Yeah,
to start
something
or something.
like that. But you get the sense that, maybe in the past, when Mason was getting ready to join the company, I can't see Mason starting at the bottom. So I would think he would have expected a plum roll from the beginning.
So that maybe had been a backhanded
Yeah, that's what I
dig
wondered.
at Mason.
Yeah.
So Mason calls Peter. He's all ready decided he wants the evidence that Peter has against his dad, or whatever the information is, the secret.
He's looking for any little leg up he can get.
But to my surprise, Mason manages to bargain him down to $50,000. Because we know he needs 230, so
Yeah.
this is only going to be 5 days worth of payments.
Yeah.
So, Peter tells Mason about Brandon. Gina's son was adopted. Cece did the adoption, and basically he makes it seem like he thinks Cece is probably Brandon's father.
Yeah.
And so he finishes off with suggesting Mason have a blood test run on the kid.
Yeah.
So this is the obvious conclusion with from what he's overheard, that Cece wants the boy in his life because it's his.
Yeah.
And that extra step of him being the grandfather obviously is not the obvious conclusion to make. But maybe Mason will eventually work that through too.
I think the obvious thing from Peter's perspective is this is something Cece desperately wants to keep a secret.
Mm-hmm.
So that is the real plum, I think, for Peter. And really what he's offering Mason is this piece of information that Cece wants kept secret. So what is behind that?
And I think he knows that the thought of another heir would really get Mason on the defensive.
Yeah.
So.
Also, I wondered if, maybe part of the reason he allows himself to be talked down to 50,000 is because really, when you think about it, given Peter's background, there's a few parties just in this one little scenario who could potentially be blackmailed or pressured in various ways.
He might try to get 50 from Gina.
Yeah.
He probably should stay away from Cece if he wants to stay in his good graces.
Mm-hmm.
So Santana, having now worked out that Brandon might be her son, almost phones Cece and asks him what Brandon's birthday is, but she realizes that's too direct and changes her question and invites him over to dinner instead.
Yeah.
And then later when she's talking to Mason, she tries to get Brandon's birthday, but Mason doesn't know it. He says he doesn't know his secretary's birthday either.
Yeah.
So then she tries to get the DeMott's phone number from information, but the number's unlisted, and she tries to bluff them, but that would never work, and it doesn't. And then she tells Rosa that she thinks Brandon is her son.
Mm-hmm. And she finally does get the phone number by sleeping with Cece and waiting until he's asleep to snatch it out of his wallet.
Mm-hmm.
And she actually has the moxie not only to do that, but to make the phone call
while
basically
he's sleeping.
While he's lying right there. So, and it's worth it.
She calls the number and Brandon picks up the phone.
Yeah.
And she says, "Oh, hi, it's Santana." I said, No, I don't want to talk to your mama. Just wondering when your birthday is.
Yeah.
And it turns out it's August 21st. And she said, "Oh, yeah, I want to give you a present." And then when she hangs up, she says, "It's my son."
Yeah.
So our theory that we came up with yesterday about the first 2 months of the show taking place slightly earlier than real time are now thrown out the window, because August 21st is clearly after Channing was murdered.
Mm-hmm.
So the only conclusion now is that after August 21st, 1979, a month after Channing was dead, that Santana wrote him a letter posthumously about having given up their son.
Yeah, maybe.
And hidden it in the gazebo and forgotten how to get to it. Was that one of the bunch of letters that was in the gazebo?
I thought it was. But...
So there's still some discontinuity here.
Mm-hmm.
And this may just be a writing error, or something may fall into place. So it's unfortunate, because it's such a, very complexly crafted backstory that unfortunately, so one unfortunate error kind of makes things seem a bit wonky.
Well, soap opera time.
Unless the letter wasn't to Channing. Maybe she wrote someone else a letter. And the letter ended up in the gazebo from a third party.
There, yeah.
Okay. So there's a possibility that we can still hope will happen. And that is it for episode 54.
Yeah, actually quite a bit happened in it. We didn't see Dominic this episode.
Didn't see Dominic or the kids?
No.
The younger kids?
No.
So, yeah, I think we'll find more about Barnaby and Minx's plans for him in the next episode. So that'll be kind of fun.
Yeah, sounds good.
All right, we will see you after we watch episode 55.
See you later.
Welcome back to Misha Dianne Watch Santa Barbara.
Hello.
We have just watched episode 55, originally aired October 12th, 1984.
Mm-hmm.
Now, Minx and Brick are in the garage, so he started as the chauffeur.
Mm-hmm.
And she says, I've been waiting since 8 o'clock. It's 8:30 now. He says, well, we agreed that I start at 9. So,
Yeah.
She says that she'll need him all the time on call. He says, nope, we agreed 9 to 5, and I have to take night classes. So he's pushing back on her right from the beginning. She says he's got to wear a uniform, too. Then she hides her money purse in the seats of the car.
Mm-hmm.
So then she tells Brick, I can't find my money purse. So he calls La Mesa to see if they found it. Of course they haven't. Then he meets Lionel Augusta, and they kind of pretend they think he's a burglar, but I think they know who he is. He says, I'm Brick Wallace, the new chauffeur. Augusta says, I do hope you like to be abused.
Mm-hmm.
While Brick washes the car, and while he's cleaning the interior, he finds the money and opens it up, and there's a bunch of cash in there. So he tells Minx, and she asks how much there was, and he tells her, and she says, you shouldn't have counted it.
Mm-hmm.
He says, well, you shouldn't have planted it.
Mm-hmm.
So she seems quite happy with his responses.
She says he's a sneak, but an honest sneak.
Mm-hmm. Lionel has been up all night,
Mm-hmm.
worried about what Augusta told him about Warren. He says Warren is not a murderer, and she counters by dumping a pile of gold coins in front of him.
Mm-hmm.
He realizes they're worth tens of thousands of dollars. And Augusta says she saw him running from the Capwell party that night, and that he tore his tuxedo on the fence.
Mm-hmm.
And she also mentions that the fire that was started the other day was in the pawn shop where Warren had pawned some of the other things.
Mm-hmm.
And Lionel wants to know what they were. And she says he wouldn't tell me, but apparently I would be pleased if I knew.
Mm.
So Warren comes in, and Augusta has to admit that she told Lionel, even though she'd been sworn to secrecy, and so Warren's angry with Augusta for that.
Mm-hmm.
He says to his dad that he didn't kill Channing, and he doesn't remember why he took the coins, which doesn't quite sound like it may be
No,
true.
that didn't sound right.
And he's very on the defensive, and he says, I'm not the only person in this family with secrets. You've got a few of your own, Dad. So, yeah, there's still something being hidden there.
Yeah, but Lionel does say to him, that he accepts that he stole the coins, but he doesn't think Warren is a murderer.
No.
So that's where he and Augusta have a difference of perception.
I have an odd feeling about this torn tuxedo.
Mm-hmm.
I'm wondering if it was Lionel that tore his tuxedo, and Augusta mistook Lionel for...
Well, they both
Warren.
have wavy-ish hair.
Are we going to find a torn tuxedo in a closet someday and find out it's not
Yeah.
Warren's? So
There's definitely more going on here than we know.
yeah, because Lionel was very quiet when she said
Yeah.
she saw Channing Warren running from the party. So yeah, I think Lionel may have some secrets about what happened the night of the party that he hasn't offered yet.
Yeah.
So Cece wakes up and finds Santana gone from her apartment, and then when he picks up his wallet, the picture of Brandon falls out. So he finds that suspicious. He realizes Santana has been looking at it,
And Santana, meanwhile, tells Rosa that Brandon is her son and she's going to LA to see him.
Mm-hmm.
Rosa tells her it's Gina's child now and to leave it alone. She's gone by the time Cece gets to the house. He has to berate Kelly for not moving back in.
Mm-hmm.
But when he finds out Santana went to LA, he quickly makes plans to go there and get ahead of her. So he needs to get to Gina's house first. So he tries to get the pilot for his private jet, but the pilot is sick. So they're calling all around for a replacement pilot. Meanwhile, Mason asks Cece about Brandon and talks to him about how he knows he set up the adoption and basically implies that it's Cece's son. Possibly with Gina? No. I don't know if he suspects that, but he has talked a lot about Cece and Gina, but I guess it wouldn't make sense for her to adopt her own son. So. Suddenly, Dominic calls unexpectedly and tells Cece, I hear you need a pilot.
So we don't know how he knows that Cece
needs a pilot. Yeah. That is a very odd
nowhere.
thing. Maybe he's got the house bug. Or she's got the house bug. So we had heard, Dominic say, I was trying to get a job as a pilot, which sounded like just a made-up excuse.
Yeah.
But the next thing you know, there's Dominic flying Cece's new plane with Cece in the back.
And Cece apparently not finding it weird that Dominic has an obviously glued-on beard, which is very apparent in full daylight.
Mm-hmm. Well, I guess Mason would say Cece's very self-absorbed, I guess. So, Dominic has a pilot's license, presumably a photo. It's of Dominic with a fake beard, too. But, yeah. Plane doesn't crash, so I guess Dominic really is a pilot. So that was really unexpected. And then Cece says, your voice sounds familiar. Do I know you? Did you fly for me before? And then Dominic says, yeah, about 5 years ago. Now, I don't know if that's a lie and that Cece knows Dominic from before, but, Dominic is covering to say that. Or if when Dominic first escaped from Alaska, Dominic actually did get a job as a pilot, as she told Joe she would, and that maybe she flew Cece around for a while. So, very unexpected turn of events.
Yeah.
But they make it to LA, and Cece zips out to Gina's in a rented limousine, and they wait for Santana to arrive, and for over an hour. I guess Santana's got a little map book and is having trouble finding Gina in Bel Air, but she makes it there, but before she can get out of her car, Cece is standing there.
So a couple things about this. First of all, I'm not really, sure what Santana's sort of goal is with this. Like, does she just present herself at the front door, and does she reveal that she's Brandon's mother, or, sort of where she's going with that?
Mm-hmm.
And it'll be interesting to see what Cece's going to do or say about it as well. Like, how is he going to stop her from whatever she's going to do?
I mean, what is he even going to say? I know you know Brandon's your son?
Yeah.
Or is he going to try and backpedal it?
Yeah. And then just a note, I don't know if taking the airplane from Santa Barbara to Los Angeles would necessarily be the fastest way there, because that is a fairly notorious airport, as we discovered ourselves, for actually getting
out of.
Yeah.
Yeah, he's lucky that when he did find a pilot, he was able to take off.
Yeah, that's actually a fairly hit-or-miss strategy.
They actually weren't allowed to land at LAX, so they actually landed in Burbank, which probably would be closer to Bel Air. Anyway, depending on which road you took. So Mason and Eden are chatting at one point. Mason says Dad's bed hasn't been slept in. And Eden says the old hag seduced him.
Yeah. Which
is interesting, because Santana's probably the same age as her. Mason says Cece's lost his luster, and Eden says, "Not for me." So, I do see some parallels between Fallon and Blake Carrington on Dynasty, and Eden and
Yeah.
Cece.
And you'll notice that Eden dresses a little more, not exactly corporate, but she's always wearing suits and ties, and I guess that conveys a certain seriousness, which Kelly, who's usually dressed in sort of a breezy, very feminine way, doesn't. That's another way to differentiate their characters, I think.
Mm-hmm. So Mason then says, "Oh, I hear you had a meeting this afternoon with the company's lawyers."
Mm-hmm.
So obviously she's getting the papers drawn up so she can get a nice cushy start at the bottom job.
Mm-hmm.
And then Cruz enters and says, "Morning, Sheriff," to Mason. And he wants to talk to Mr. C, who's not there, obviously, but Eden grabs him and says, "I'm not going to blow your cover." So she knows all about his CIA work.
Yeah, she knows that he's more than just a oil rig guy.
Yeah, she mentions the name of the last mission he was on, like the code name, like this one was Genesis or something. And Cruz says, "You don't mention to anyone what you know about me.
Yeah.
One word to anyone, and it's your life too, kid."
Yeah.
So I don't know if he's saying that the CIA would take out Eden, or that there are third parties that are looking for, either Cruz specifically or an operative known to have gone on some mission, and if it's determined it's Cruz, then someone would act against them.
I also wondered if perhaps she had done a bit of this sort of activity herself, and maybe that would be something that would become known if she started, blathering about some of Cruz's activities.
Because it almost sounded like she may have been on a mission with him.
Yeah, that's what I wondered.
Like, maybe not the recent one that she mentioned, but when they talked about, I want to say Africa, they were together, but I think I'm mixing it up with Lionel's and Veronica's story. But I'm wondering if maybe that incident, they were actually working together for the CIA or something.
Mm-hmm.
So, yeah, I'm excited to find out what that is about. Kelly, as she zips in and out of the mansion, takes the time to search Channing's room, and I don't think we necessarily find out if she got anything from there or found anything. So maybe she did, but we won't find out until maybe she meets up with Dominic again.
Well, this was another one of those conversations. First, Santana talked to Rosa before she left for Los Angeles, and swore Rosa to not tell Cece that she was going to Los Angeles, and Rosa managed to confirm it to Cece without actually saying it. And then Kelly came in and asked Rosa not to just have her disturbed at all while she was in Channing's room, and the first thing Rosa did was tell Cece that she was in Channing's room. So I don't think Rosa's really a very good confidant to have in any situation.
I think she's very loyal to Cece.
Yeah.
Because even with her own daughter, she's basically saying, "Oh, we'll just leave Brandon alone. He's got a good life."
Yeah.
So Kelly is being followed after she gets in her car. She notices that she's being followed. She goes to quite an old-looking church and sits there. And it seems to me maybe she knows it from somewhere, because it doesn't seem like she's just run in there to hide out. Maybe she's been there before. It seems to make sense with what happens next, because someone comes up behind her, and it's Joe.
Mm-hmm.
And she hasn't seen him yet at the end of this episode. But I wonder if they did some sort of, fake marriage ceremony when they were dating in that church. And she went there, to think about Joe and whether he was alive or not. And Joe thought, "I'll bet Kelly's in that church. I'm going to go straight there." So that was it for this episode. Is there anything?
I noticed that Joe seemed to be wearing the same jacket that the Russian sailor was wearing, his Russian captor was wearing. So it made me think that he had defeated that Russian captain.
And he had been given a black T-shirt, so maybe topped it off with the jacket as well.
Yeah.
So this is interesting now. He's obviously come to Kelly, didn't go home to his parents to say I'm alive, or to Cruz or anything, just to Kelly. So, wondering if he's planning to stay dead for a little while longer. Well, because that would give him a good opportunity to do some undercover, investigation.
Yeah, that would be an easier way to go in some ways.
It occurs to me that with all the talk about the real killer coming after Joe and or Kelly or Dominic, we've never actually seen the real killer do anything yet.
No.
Everything that's been done has been by Augusta or Warren, who we know aren't the real killer. So it's bizarre with all these concerns. Every time something happened, it must be the real killer, but we know it's not. So the real killer may not even be aware that Joe's out of prison, may not even be aware that Joe's looking. It's like this boogeyman that hasn't actually acted in any way, positively or negatively, since the show started.
The one thing I'm interested to see if this will tie in with the real killer, or if this is just something that was introduced as a plot point and then maybe will be forgotten about. I don't know, because it hasn't really come up again. I would still be curious to know who bopped Joe on the back of the head when he had Dominic at gunpoint.
That's right, yeah, we still haven't seen the answer to that.
Yeah. So I don't know if that will ever be answered, if that's just something they threw in and then forgot about, or if that maybe has some connection with the real killer.
I mean, I think when Joe searched Dominic's place, he would have mentioned if there were 2 bedrooms. So that's not like a partner or something living with Dominic, assuming that is, of course, Dominic's sole apartment.
Yeah.
And that's not just a safe house or whatever.
I mean, if it is something that will come up again, I could see maybe the real killer had been following Joe or following Dominic and didn't really want to see Dominic uncovered at this point. Maybe they still felt that they had to learn a bit more about where Dominic was going with things or something, and so allowed him to escape. But I don't know. I don't know if we'll ever really see a resolution to that at that point. It seems to be dropped for now.
One thing about this episode is car following Kelly might not necessarily have been Joe.
No, it is. It looked like a brown sedan of some kind.
I assume Joe jogged up there or surfed up there.
Yeah. So that might be a point of interest too that we'll find out more about.
So we are halfway through the first year, which is only a half year, of Santa Barbara, episode 55 out of 110. The only day off this year is Thanksgiving Day. Every other day of the year had an episode of Santa Barbara. No other preemptions.
Wow.
So we will be back next week as we start week 12 as Misha and Dianne watch Santa Barbara.
Bye-bye.